All right. G'day, Binantians, and welcome to this week's Binance Beach. I am back with Mr. Worldwide, the Globetrotter, the Bintern Orlando Moores, mate. You were in Queenstown for our Binance New Zealand meetup, and now you're in Hong Kong for Concensus. Thanks for gracing us with your presence, man. It's nice to have you on the show.
Thanks, Lodo. No, not a problem. And I can't think of a better way to start my morning. It's 8:30 here in Hong Kong than speaking with you. So, yeah, definitely excited to get into today. And Hong Kong is amazing. So happy to report from the ground.
That's awesome. We'll get into a bit more of a deep dive on the Consensus conference and how that's going. But can you give us a quick run through of the energy on the ground and how it's been so far?
Yeah, very, very, very bullish to every extent, I think. There's so many different projects in and around the space here at the conference, but also the side events as well. There's a huge swath of just side events analogous. So it's been a lot of fun attending some of those, going to the conference yesterday. I'll head back again today and just meeting people and feeling the love. It just definitely feels like a very community-centric conference and city in general.
Well, man, it's been a pretty crazy week in crypto, and I feel like we say that a lot, but this really was pretty insane. Over the weekend, we had another nation state meme coin launched called LIBRA, came out of Argentina, and it was promoted by the Argentinian president, Javier Milei. Can you give us a bit of a rundown of what actually happened earlier this week and over the weekend? What is this story?
For sure. And from everything I say, a lot of the details are still emerging. But Lodo, you are right to say that it has been another crazy week in crypto land. And this is, I'd say, one of the bigger events that's taken place recently. So there's been, a new meme coin launched. It was under the guise of helping with Argentina's economic development. Argentina has struggled, as I'm sure our viewers may be aware, in the past 10, 20, 30 years in that sense. So there was definitely some excitement to be able to help prompt maybe a new wave of economic activity from this meme coin. Unfortunately, however, it was quickly retracted, like the support from Javier himself, and it seemed to be kind of like a gigantic rug pull in a sense. Such a shame for the space, to be honest, and it was discussed a fair bit on the ground at Consensus yesterday. Lucy Liu, the Solana president, the Solana Foundation president, was mentioning it in her speech yesterday. It's just not a good look for the space, and I don't think it's directly applicable necessarily to Solana. But yeah, hundreds of millions are extracted essentially. So definitely something to be wary about if you see any other nation state actors saying that they've got a meme coin. We've had it, quite a fair bit recently, but with the Central African Republic, we've had it with, I believe, the Bahamas and Bermuda. It's just not a good look later for the space, to be honest with you.
For sure. And what really stood out to me about this one is how much of a short life cycle this token had in particular, and how the life cycle of these kind of schemes is just getting shorter and shorter and getting more kind of transparent and open and straightforward about how it's just not about fundamentals. It's not about technicals or innovation. It's just about representation of culture, which is a big old jump up and then a big old run down the other side. This was like 3 or 4 hours from launch to running down, like essentially whatever it was, 80, 90, 95, 99% of its value. And when you think about crypto in 2017, you think about ICOs and how some of those were clearly intended to launch tokens without building tech in the long term, but they ran for 6 or 12 or 24 months, right? And then you had like the birth of alt season and meme coins, which ran up and down in a matter of months, and then pump.fun meant that meme coins ran up and down in a matter of days, and now these things are running up and down in a matter of hours. And it just definitely feels like there's this section of the market right now, which is a poor reflection on crypto in general and what we're trying to build, and the power that this technology has to put more money back in your pocket as a consumer, to cut out middlemen, to reduce settlement times and costs, and to give you the opportunity to hold sovereign bearer assets like Bitcoin. And it's just about a complete pump and dump. It really is pretty disappointing and hard to see in this space. Yeah, how's the reaction been at Concensus? You mentioned that you've heard a few comments. How's the energy there, given that this has happened the weekend before?
For sure. I think that everyone has been united in pushing back against this. Of course, meme coins have been exciting, talked about in a variety of different ways for maybe the last 18 months. But this has definitely been a united front of, we don't want to see this in our space. This is the wrong type of energy. It's not promoting us at all in the light right, as you've touched on. And that's been really positive to see. Sometimes you get some pretty heated opinions on one side or the other in crypto land, but this was definitely something that has united on all fronts. Aside from that, the energy has been great. It's been so cool to come here to Hong Kong. It's my first time being in and around the city here, and it definitely feels like a similar section of people to what we have back home in Australia and even in Queenstown, as you touched on before. It's very, very community-based. Crypto is so incredible in that aspect. Everyone's very welcoming. And whether you're from the US, come to Hong Kong, I've had conversations with people from Mexico or different parts of Africa. It all feels the same. We're all trying to build and push the needle forward, wherever that may be.
What's the attitude around the Solana network at the conference? And do you think that meme coins and meme coin season has run its course? Or do you think we're going to continue to see celebrities, potentially political figures, and anybody and their dog launching a meme coin?
It's a funny way to put it, but it's a valid question, right? So I think after what's happened with LIBRA, it feels like we've almost reached the top of like maybe the meme coin cycle, super cycle. And this is obviously from a personal perspective. Please don't take any financial advice from that. But people feel tired. On the ground here, people are feeling like we want to pivot back to that infrastructure base, like that good tech, and maybe stray a bit away from that more speculative side of crypto. And I don't think you can blame people for that. Like, this week has been, again, insane. And I know we say that on the podcast quite often, but truly this is something that a lot of people, you couldn't even fathom it. So I do think that there will be a slight push towards more, of that good tech infrastructure stuff.
Be fascinating to see how Solana responds to this, and whether this end to the meme coin super cycle, thanks Murad, is something which is going to dampen Solana's progress a little. Obviously, when you look at Solana's revenue, daily active users, all of its kind of key metrics as a blockchain, selling block space, meme coins are taking up like 70% of this attention of and generating, like 70% of fees on Solana. And Solana has a lot of really interesting projects, and there's a heap going on in that ecosystem, which is really positive and is true to kind of crypto values and is pushing innovation forward. But without the meme coin element potentially driving revenue and attention to the space, it'll be interesting to see whether this opens up an opportunity for other layer one blockchains that kind of compete on that fast and cheap value proposition, or potentially a shift back towards the broader Ethereum and layer 2 ecosystem. Whether that is something we'll start to see. Do you have any thoughts on that, and whether we'll see a move back to fundamentals when it comes to selling block space, or whether you think Solana's competitive advantage and network effect right now is strong enough that it'll continue growing and building through this period?
It's a great question. I think that Solana has shown both its community and its technology to be extremely resilient for a very long time. After things happened, what happened with FTX and like SBF's investment or Almeida's investment in Solana, that was of course flooded to the ground, right? It pushed Solana to I think $8, $8 or $9. And since then, the community and like the builders in that space have been so resilient. So this is, somewhat of a mark against Solana from like a marketing perspective, but it's not truly to do with Solana. Solana has just been chosen by users, and as you mentioned, like the network effect. People are choosing Solana because there's other people trading there, but also it's the fastest. It feels battle tested, et cetera, right? So I don't think this is a chain specific issue. I think that this would have happened anywhere, regardless of what chain it was. And I think Solana has proven itself to be resilient. I think it will definitely push forward from this.
We've got an interesting question here from Max Power on the YouTube. Thanks for sending this through, Max. Have any of the network teams like Solana considered if it's time to self-regulate? And he asks if there's any comments at Concensus on this. Do you have any thoughts on the idea of chains self-regulating, Orlando?
To be honest, I can't say I do. And this is not a topic that's been discussed on the ground at Concensus, at least not in the conversations that I've been having. But it definitely is an interesting thing to think about. How about you, Leto? Any thoughts around that at all?
I mean, the regulation point is fascinating. And I think probably some of the strong opinions that you might have referenced before are that on a decentralized permissionless network, anybody can do anything, and that's the feature, it's not the bug. And so the reality of a truly free market like these networks, and I use that statement fairly broadly, right? You can get into how decentralized they are, that kind of spectrum of decentralization, the spectrum of permissionlessness, and you can go down the rabbit hole of Tether settles on Tether, blah, blah, blah. But broadly speaking, these are decentralized permissionless ecosystems, and they let anybody do what they want. And it's kind of the point of crypto, and those are crypto values. And so I think if chains began censoring or attempting to overregulate the projects or the activity on chain, then I think that starts to move us away from those crypto values and back towards TradFi. And that's not necessarily what I think the direction of Solana would be. That's not to say that there isn't a place for centralized, regulated blockchains, which are purely based on the value proposition of making things like settlement faster and cheaper. I think we'll see a lot of that, but I also think that the Bitcoin kind of ethos of decentralized, permissionless, open source is an equally important part of the ecosystem because it creates that control and it creates that exit from the centralized and permissioned ecosystems. And that's a really important control and check and balance on power. That would be my kind of thoughts on that question.
For sure. I think just going back to what you were saying before about the network effect as well, and the culture of crypto, it would be extremely difficult. It would be an extremely difficult sell for any chain to try to give rollbacks as a constant feature and then continue to hold their users. Like you're saying, it's the good and the bad, and it is a feature, not necessarily a bug. I think we have to come together as a space in a community and ensure that we are staying on the right side of being, of course, being compliant, but also just like the overall ethical side of things as well. So great points for sure.
And I think Solana or any network can make positive steps towards encouraging and investing in the right projects, creating the right avenues for genuine innovation to come on chain. But in terms of self-regulation or self-censorship, I think that's maybe not something that we're likely to see. But great question, Max, and an interesting discussion to follow. Let's dive into sentiment at the moment. Retail sentiment, it feels like, is at an all-time low. The timeline is crying, and they are particularly, I think, despondent about the decline of Solana, potentially the death of Solana. I've seen this is the end of Solana a bunch, and I mean that often marks a good entry point, but that's another discussion.
Yeah.
Why is there such a low retail sentiment at the moment when we see such incredible news coming through on the institutional front? MicroStrategy is up for another 2 bill in Bitcoin, and we see progress out of the US from this finally pro-crypto set of politicians and regulators. Why is there such a divide right now in the institutional and retail sentiment?
It's a really good question, and I think I'll answer that on like a two-pronged approach. So the first one, and we mentioned that just before we hopped on air, but Armani, the backpack co-founder, mentioned this very succinctly, in that there's been such a stigma behind crypto for so long that now we're starting to get direction from the US. It feels like that's opening up, and it gives a really clear path forward for acquiring top talent. So from a builder's perspective, you're finally able to get funding. You're finally able to go after like human capital. Make sure that you can get the people that you want aboard instead of them all flooding to AI. So there's definitely a very positive sentiment from that front, which I thought was very interesting for him to reference. Because again, quite different from like the retail perspective of feeling like hard done by, to be frank. If you're playing around in the Solana trenches, like mayhaps somebody on the call may be, it feels like it's very hard to get an edge, and particularly with what's been happening with LIBRA and everything in and around like those type of plays, it feels like there's almost no point in trading that at all. So I definitely feel for the more degenerate crypto users, like again, maybe somebody on the call is, and I think that's starting to like coalesce around the space a little bit because people are feeling tired.
Well, let's see. It'll be interesting to see whether this does mark the top and the peak and the end of meme coin season, or whether we'll see more celebrity meme launches in the future. Let's finish on markets before we wrap it up and let you go back to the conference and make some friends. On the Bitcoin side of things, this week we are down just a touch. Bitcoin's been fairly resilient, kind of had a bit of a run down. Down to that 148 Aussie. We usually look at this in US dollars, but I imagine it's pretty similar. I don't know. Look, we are very similar. Down 1% on the week and currently sitting at 96,500. So, yeah, not a whole heap of movement. Bitcoin feels like a mid-90s stable coin a little bit at the moment, and we're maybe ready for a bit more positive news to push the market back into a positive frame of mind. Let's have a look briefly too at our top 100 coins. And if we look across the top of the market, ETH is pretty much flat on the last 7 days. Ripple up 10%. That's a bit of a funny one. But a lot of these other layer ones, BNB down 6%, Solana down 14%, almost, kind of really off the back of this negative market sentiment towards the ecosystem. Doge down 3%. That's performing fairly well for a lot of the meme coins, which are down a hell of a lot more. So a real mixed bag this week in terms of performance, but a lot of these layer ones kind of looking down, which is kind of interesting. Fear and greed sitting down at 40 and Bitcoin dominance up at 60. So this is showing some of the most bearish sentiment we've seen in the market for quite some time, but market cap still sitting above 3 trillion. So that's not too bad. What's your general market outlook at the moment, Orlando? Do you remain bullish? Do you think we'll have a good 2025, or are we starting to feel like we're seeing the end of a bit of a cycle coming into February?
It's a great question, and I think from a sentiment perspective, it feels like we're heading down maybe a little bit of the end of that cycle. But to be honest, I don't really see it. There's been a lot of talks about like what's the next catalyst, what sends Bitcoin like skyrocketing or whatever else. But I think that the developments and the legislative kind of opening up of the US is just, I can't not be bullish on that. And regardless of what happens like day to day in the space and like the horrible LIBRA situation or whatever else, I will always continue to be bullish on the space long term. And I think that we're just getting into the year, so we still have like a long time ahead of us. And I think that like that's enough time to be bullish for sure. If you ask me in December, and this was happening in December, I think I'd definitely say feeling maybe a bit bearish for the rest of the year. But 2025 will continue to be an exciting year, in my opinion.
Me too. Let's get back to living it. Thanks so much for tuning in and giving us a bit of a walk around Hong Kong, mate. It was good to chat. Look forward to having you back in Australia next week.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, guys, please make sure to like, subscribe, and stay updated with Binance Australia on our socials. Let us know if you've got any questions or guests for the next episode. But enjoy, guys. Signing out. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you next week. Stay safe and DYOR. Please note that this discussion includes insights from non-affiliated third parties and key opinion leaders. Binance provides this platform for informational and educational purposes only and is not responsible for any content or insights provided. This information should not be considered as financial, tax, or investment advice from Binance.